Well, hello everyone. Welcome to you all who's joining us tonight for our very first ever Cancer Support Community Fireside Chat on this 90-degree day to share some education on planning your life and estate and how legacy relates in all that. What is legacy? The first thing we should do is tell you who we are. I'm Libby Eppinga, Director of Donor Support with Cancer Support Community. I have the pleasure of hosting Miss Beth McClelland. Beth is a very successful business owner in La Miranda, whether she would tell you that or not. She owns La Miranda Financial Planning. As a fiduciary, she has earned her MBA and CFP. But why I really wanted to introduce her to you as CSC members and donors and what sets her apart is that she has a holistic approach that she brings to financial planning of all things. Just some housekeeping for tonight for our 1-hour session. This is a webinar, so you can see us. We cannot see you, but the chat box is open and available at any time. If you have questions, feel free to write them in the chat box. The session is also going to be recorded and will be sent out. If you prefer to not have your name show in the text chat box, that is fine, and we will take that out once we go and edit the recording before we actually send it out. So thank you all for joining tonight. Beth, thank you for being here. I would love if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection to Cancer Support Community.
Sure. First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here today. Participating in events like this and supporting Cancer Support Community is part of my holistic legacy plan. I'm a certified financial planner in the La Miranda area, and I focus my financial planning practice around helping people get in touch with themselves and their values, and then matching them with their daily living and financial resources. The overall goal is to have a plan optimizing your living and finding financial peace while you move through life transitions. Sounds like a mouthful, but hopefully by the end of the program today, you'll have an understanding of what I mean as it relates to legacy and estate planning. So in terms of Cancer Support Community, in 2010, I was living my typical stressful life, rushing around trying to be all things to all people, my children, my husband, my parents, and also my demanding full-time job. It was too much. So I left my job and started to pay more attention to my own needs. Health-wise, I'd always done all the basics, checked all the boxes in terms of my medical care, but I hadn't paid enough attention to the less obvious things. And then it seemed like out of the blue, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. I did the usual freaking out. What else was I going to do? And then miraculously, I came across some information about CSC and the newly diagnosed cancer support group. It was breast cancer support group. What a gift. That group was exactly what I needed at that very challenging time in my life. Today, several of the ladies that I met in that group continue to be some of my closest friends. We still have breakfast together once a month, not quite that often, not regular and during the COVID times, but we're getting back into it. And wonderfully, last fall, we all celebrated 10 years of being cancer-free. I am so grateful to Cancer Support Community for the wonderful experiences I had in this group, the educational events, the calming influences of programs like meditation and yoga. I think it's so unfortunate that too many of us have to go through something like having cancer to start paying more attention to how we choose to live our lives. Maybe the pandemic has served in that capacity for some of us, and ideally paying a lesser price for this perspective than having cancer.
Well, first of all, I want to comment on 10 years of being cancer-free. That is an amazing accomplishment, if that's the right word, and a big marker that I think everyone on this call can appreciate. So that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. And I understand about how people can put themselves last. I think most people probably do. I know I do, having 3 kids. I also know that there's really important boxes in life that we all want to check or feel we should check. And that's why we're hosting this call. Estate planning, planning your life and your legacy is sort of one of those boxes that we either want to check or are not sure how to do that in life. So I would love if you'd expand a little bit more on the idea of holistic legacy. What does that actually mean?
My thinking about a holistic legacy is that it's about living and leaving with intention. It's making an effort to understand what your values are and then live by them. Starting with reflection and self-care to understand what's really important to you, and then behaving in ways that exemplify your values with your family, your friends, and the broader community. Many of us are familiar with getting your estate plan documents in order: the wills, trusts, powers of attorney, guardianship for your children, but there's more to it than that. Even in terms of the estate planning, there is more to it in terms of getting it right or making it easy for those who are going to be coming after you or helping to take care of your affairs. It's getting everything in good order. Things like lists of accounts, debts, all the information that would be useful. It's making sure you have life insurance if there are people who are financially dependent on you, and minimizing what an executor might not know about your finances in your life. And then another thing that's kind of new in this world today is having information about your social media passwords and permission to access various accounts. One other thing that actually I almost forgot as I was planning this program today, but I think it's really important, and that is managing the expectations of your heirs and beneficiaries. I know it's really challenging and people do not want to talk about either money or death. But if we don't do that, we may have people, heirs and beneficiaries who have expectations that can lead to trouble down the road. I imagine most of us know families where siblings or other relatives no longer talk to each other because of how an estate was managed or someone had expectations that didn't pan out. This is not the legacy most people are hoping for. What you can do about that is communicating with the heirs to manage their expectations. Write a letter of instruction if you don't want to have that conversation. You can put it in writing, and then it is your message. Also considering providing means to deal with potential conflicts, because it's not like this would be the first time it's happened. Including suggestions for using a mediator or dividing things up beforehand, talking about it, and maybe if there are siblings where there might be some concern about issues that could come up, use a third-party executor, somebody who doesn't have a vested interest in the outcomes. In my own life, I'm both trustee and executor for my mother. So obviously, I'm not a third party because I have 3 siblings. But I do a number of things to try and keep myself out of trouble in that role. Every couple of years, I share information about her net worth, plans for future expenses, and I also update them in regard to her plan for charitable giving upon her death. No surprises is my goal. So far, so good. And also remember, your memorial is a legacy event. And that there's a saying that says, if you want a great memorial, first you have to live a good life. What this means to me is knowing what your values are, living and acting on them as examples for others, staying on top of conflicts and regrets, heal wounds, ugly divorces, and as applicable, family reunification efforts to get over old grudges. Set up your plans in ways to minimize conflict. The idea of I'll let them sort it out is usually pretty dangerous. Being attentive to those important relationships. Those are all really important things. Many of us may not know that some very wealthy families like the Kennedys discuss and share family values to carry them forward to future generations. But truth be told, you don't have to be a Kennedy to take this kind of action.
You said a lot of really good things there, and that's good. You don't have to be a Kennedy. I am certainly not a Kennedy, but it all starts with relationships, doesn't it? I mean, every aspect of our life. So most importantly, how we plan that and want to end that. I also have spoken with you before, and you've mentioned how the world we live in is technology based. We have passwords for everything, and how important it is to share your passwords with your loved one, whoever that might be. That's something that I would not have thought of, but important to note. So I thought that was interesting. Now I know that later on in our chat, we're going to be talking more on the financial aspects of planning, but I want to keep focusing on your points of legacy and wonder if you have suggestions about actions people can take to focus on who they are now. So in other words, how can someone start to think of value planning while they're living before we get into financial aspects of estate planning?
Good comment and good question. I go back to what I said before about having had cancer and how that led me to reflecting about what's important. As a part of my recovery, I spent a lot of time thinking about my future life and what was important. And I really suspect we all did more of this than usual during the pandemic. I strongly suggest you reflect on your life and ask yourself some questions. In terms of what do we mean by values, I always like definitions, and I found one that I found was meaningful to me, and that is values are the principles that give our lives meaning and allow us to persevere through adversity. That's quite a strong concept there. Mm-hmm. But just knowing what it is doesn't really provide the whole story. If we're not entirely sure of what those values are, there are ways to uncover them. There's an approach that I like, which is to think of 3 to 6 people you admire or love, famous or not, could be a parent or other family member, and consider what you admire about them. For me, I think about my grandmother, my aunt, typically strong women. And I also think about Eleanor Roosevelt. She is someone that I have long admired. She's a strong woman who devoted time and resources to human rights and causes that made the lives of others better by caring for people, and in difficult times. I'm certainly not in a position to impact the world at the scale she did, but there are lots of small ways that I can make a difference. There are a lot of other ways that you can do it. There's lots of books and internet tools with prompts to gather information about your life, and also containing prompts to uncover your values. I reviewed a number of these life memoir type books that are available on the market, and I have with me today the one that I found to be of or one of my favorites. That's what I mean to say. Anyway, this particular book was created as an inspiration in honor of someone named Eric Smith. He died unexpectedly in 2018 at age 55. His family found a diary where he had captured his values and memories about his life. And it made such a difference to them in dealing with his passing that they created this book to help others assemble a memoir. And in keeping with his values, they donate the proceeds from this book to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. I thought that was such a complete full circle. The book contains a specific section on values, but in truth, they're sprinkled throughout the book. I gave a similar book to a similar one of these books to my mother as an early Mother's Day gift. Not really sure how she was going to feel about that, but she loved it. Truth be told, if I had thought about it more carefully before before I had the reticence, I would have realized that there's almost nothing more flattering than someone who is truly interested in you. The other thing that's valuable about having something like a book or whatever you might put together is that it said that a person never really dies while there are living memories. And if we don't leave things behind us, those memories aren't there. Back to values, they really are portrayed in just about everything we do and create. And there's lots of different things that you can do. Photo albums. Many of us don't do that because it takes a little bit of time. But it's a little bit easier to do things like telling stories to family members, especially children and future generations. My family had a getaway for my parents' 50th anniversary, and we did something that worked out amazingly well. We gave all the grandchildren a list of questions. Each grandchild had different questions to use to have individual conversations with their grandparents. I believe it created a bond, and it also created an opportunity to have stories to carry forward. Those children remember them today. Other things you can do, take a trip to discover your roots and take your family with you if you can. Teach and set living examples of your values. Everyday kindness and thoughtfulness. Teaching future generations how to handle money and how to live a peaceful life. Setting examples of giving time or money to charitable organizations and having positive examples of relationships. Another one, if have a interest in voting, I took my kids with me to the polls. Sometimes it felt like dragging them, but they did go with me, and my sons, who are both of voting age today, vote in every election that is available to them. And I feel maybe I did something, I don't know, but they do know that it was an important thing to me. You can be creative. The opportunities to create, to leave these memories are endless. And you don't need to be a super rich person from a family that's rich, or you just need to be someone who wants to leave something for future generations.
Yeah, I know a good friend to Cancer Support Community. She's one of the founding members. She's 90 years old, just recently had her 90th birthday. And she's decided to write in a book, like the book that you showed, because she wants to leave something for her kids and her grandkids. And you know what? She's having great fun doing it. She has a lot of memories to recall after 90 years, but she's having a blast doing it. It's like researching yourself again. So I find the book to be interesting. Beth, with all of those examples, what's your favorite way? What's your favorite way to communicate and live with intention?
For me, it's about living my beliefs and leaving a trail behind that supports them. I've always considered myself to be a humanitarian almost before I had a clear understanding of what that meant. But I do my best to show gratitude and thank yous to folks who seldom hear them. And I volunteer my time for political and human rights causes that I believe in. And in addition to doing events like this for Cancer Support Community, I've included instructions in my own estate plan for a financial gift to CSC upon my passing. There are lots and lots of ways. Similar to the book, there's another idea that came out of Stanford, and it's called a life review letter. I haven't done this yet for myself, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to do it as a letter or a book, but sometimes people also call this effort an ethical will, but they're very similar. This is something anyone can do, but truth be told, very few people actually make this kind of an effort. It's a letter or a video that reflects on life, family, friends, and community. Some of us are good at communicating these types of messages with those around us, but most are not. Ideas for the content of this kind of a letter include acknowledging important people, treasured moments in our life, apologies, forgiveness, gratitude, expressions of love, and even saying goodbye. Communication of specific messages to individual or to the family or others, also, a valuable thing. I kind of feel it could be a general letter to all those in your life, but you can also write a letter to a specific person or a group of people, like your children, or someone who's been very influential in your life, and you want to let them know. I try to leave myself time to live an intentional life. Honestly, it's not always easy.
Thank you for sharing that and for sharing all of your actual tangible ideas and ways that we can start to think about not just our estate planning, but us, who we are, who we want to be, and what we want to leave, and in ways that we can actually do that. So I also wanted to mention that if there's anyone on this call that is interested in the book that Beth held up, we do have someone who has decided to donate those books to you if you're interested in that. So I'll be connecting after the call to see if you would like that. So we're going to move along in our session and our chat to, some might say, the more intimidating aspects of estate planning. So you're a financial planner, Beth. You own a successful financial planning business named La Miranda Financial Planning. What are the money aspects of legacy? You must have thoughts around that too.
Well, I approach my financial planning practice as a financial life planner. That and the concepts as applied to money are really not so different. It's understanding your relationship with money and matching your life with your financial resources. I got into this work to help people live better lives, to have a healthy relationship with money. And if your resources are limited, make the best life you can with what you have. If you have enough money to live your dreams, then make them happen. It's about optimizing. And understanding it is the first big step. I know Bill Gates was in the news today, but he has done an incredible number of things. And I heard an interview him where he was asked a very bold question that I thought his answer was just amazing. The question was, what's it like to be one of the richest men in the world? His answer was spectacular. He said, it gives me the time and resources to make a difference in the world, to take on big problems and make progress with them in ways that improve the lives of people less fortunate than myself. None of us are quite like Bill Gates, but there are things that we can do to accomplish this. Some of them are managing your debt, teaching your children and future generations about how to have a healthy relationship with money. And by the way, sadly, this is not done in our schools. Having the estate plan that we talked about, complete with instructions for the trustee, and then revisit it every year because the rules change. In my own life, my father had put together a great estate plan, but unfortunately he didn't revisit it. And as his trustee and executor, I didn't see it until he was in hospice and close to death. And after looking at it, I knew that there were things that could or should have been different, but I didn't have the heart to talk with him about it at that moment and to make those changes. He wanted to make sure that he felt like everything was in order and that things would be taken care of in his world, even though he wouldn't be there to manage it. So do revisit it every few years, and particularly if the laws have changed. I also think it's a good idea to have a documented plan for charitable giving if you're so inclined. The 2018 tax law changes reduced tax advantages, charitable giving for the average person. So there are a number of things that you can do that can work within and take advantage of the current tax laws. One of them is a donor advised fund. That provides a fabulous opportunity to bundle your donations for tax purposes into 1 year and then disperse the funds as you choose over future years. I helped my mother set up one of these accounts. When I initially set out to do this with her, I contacted her bank and they had a very large minimum balance. And I was a little discouraged by it, but I didn't think it had to be that way. So I'm not pitching for Schwab, but they do offer a donor advised fund that has no minimum contribution and a minimum distribution of $50. So that's where my mother ended up with her donor advised fund. And it's been incredibly easy to use. I think it's worth looking into.
I think it's interesting, our relationship with money and when that starts. And it's not taught in school. It's sort of one of those things we have to all just figure out on our own, no matter what age we are, and sort of swim through all of this stuff. So I find something that can be confusing, and I hear this from others too that I talk to, because it's ever changing and it's state by state, are taxes. Is there any one size fits all to look at taxes in California when it comes to a tax sort of snapshot of benefits, charitable giving? Any insight to share on taxes?
Well, first of all, I can share what I know and understand, but I'm neither a CPA or a tax expert. But taxes they have an important place in financial planning, because most of us really don't want to give more than we need to the government. We may have other choices of charities. The government is not my number one charity, although they do good work sometimes. Anyway, to say the least, taxes can be complicated, and they tend to get only more complicated in efforts to close loopholes. So I strongly suggest, if you have specific questions about how taxes and charitable contributions affect you, that you contact an expert to assist you with it. But there is some information or some general guidelines for the average to above average taxpayer. But do know that these rules change quickly. So here's an overview. Charitable contributions had historically been part of what many taxpayers included when they filed taxes using itemized deductions with the IRS. But in 2018, the IRS tax law changed the rules around itemized and standard deductions, making it much more difficult for an average person to make a deductible contribution. This led to some reduced contributions, and some charitable organizations were seriously impacted. Fortunately, there was some re-looking at this, and in 2020, there was a new rule that came into play that allows most people to deduct $300 in cash contributions, even if you don't itemize. And when we talk about itemized deductions, for married people, it's $24,800, and for single people, $12,400. But the current tax laws and unless you have a huge mortgage, many people will not qualify for the itemized deductions. And so consequently, you can't do the charitable deductions along with that. And then just for fun, the rules do differ between cash, stock, cars, and clothing. Cash contributions can be an itemized deduction if you meet the guidelines, up to an adjusted gross income. Usually it's been 60%, but for this year, along with that $300 cash deduction, there's been a temporary suspension, and at least for 2020, you can deduct up to 100% of your AGI, thereby limiting or eliminating most of your tax liability. Appreciated stocks, there's a bit more of a limitation on that at 30%. But donating appreciated stocks is still a really good opportunity because you can avoid capital gains tax. No one ever pays the capital gains tax when appreciated stock is donated. Cars, boats, and airplanes. It's the smaller of gross proceeds from the sale by the organization you donated it to, or the fair market value of donation. The other good thing that remains is that charitable deductions that you aren't able to use in 1 year can be carried for up to 5 years. So that's a positive bonus. I mentioned the donor advised fund earlier. It does work as if the donor advised fund were the charity. If it's cash, the same rules apply. If it's appreciated stock, again, it's 30%, but you carry over those deductions. And then continue to use that money to make donations over time. There's also qualified charitable distributions directly from an IRA. You can avoid taxation of ordinary income in this way, which is even better than avoiding the capital gains tax. But to do this, you have to be at least 70 and a half, and the limit is $100,000. There's some other more complex options. A charity is a beneficiary for an IRA, and also charitable trusts. I'm not going to go into details about those, but just know that there are a variety of options available, and the tax and estate planning resources are familiar with those and can help. But then I talked about the IRS information, and we still have to think about California. And it used to be that the majority of the rules were the same. But then in 2018, California did not adopt the IRS changes in regard to standard and itemized deductions and some other things. So you can still take that itemized deduction and the charitable contribution for up to 50% of AGI for cash. We also did not adopt the $300 cash donation or the cash up to 100% of AGI for 2020. So this is why the answer, when you ask about charitable donations and taxes, why the answer is generally, it depends.
It depends. It's a lot of information, a lot of acronyms and vocab words. So, but very, very helpful. And I'm going to take the opportunity to plug in a new committee that we have at Cancer Support Community that I'm really excited about. And it's to assist in estate planning, legacy giving, and it is the Legacy Giving Committee that we formed of professionals who are estate planning attorneys, fiduciaries, and CPAs. So this is something that's new to Cancer Support Community that we're going to do this year to provide information and a resource to you as members and donors to answer all of these hard questions when needed. So thank you so much, Beth. I'm wondering if there's any other closing thoughts that you might have to sort of close us out before we have questions on this values-based approach to estate planning.
Sure. I believe a good way to think about legacy is from the inside out, meaning be self-aware, know your values, then live them and model them to those around you to have a lasting influence. If you want to go deeper, write a letter, make a video, get a book to gather information about your life, photo albums, whatever suits you in terms of creating that legacy. And also giving back to your community in ways that support your values. Time and money both work, depending on your available resources. The value I follow in doing this kind of work is I want to make the world at least a slightly better place because I've lived. That's my value. And I thank all of you for your time to participate in this webinar today.
Great, thank you, Beth. You've made our night better by being here. So thank you very much for your time. And the chat box is opened, as I mentioned, to questions. If you have any, feel free to write them down and we'll see what we have. Okay, so Beth, we have a couple questions.
Okay, great.
I am interested in the book. That's great. I will be sure to mark you down and your email address, and we will send you a book. Thank you for letting us know. I'd be remiss not to mention that Cancer Support Community has a legacy program, and it's called the Cancer Support Community Shannon McGowan Legacy Society. And this, excuse me, it's the end of the day. Society consists of cancer support members or donors who have decided to leave CSC in their planning some way, somehow, for some amount. And they've also decided to let us know that they do want to be a part of our society. So certainly don't want to miss sharing that information if that's not known. And there is opportunity to learn more on that too after our chat. So I don't see any more questions coming through. Oh, one more. Thank you, Beth. This gives us a lot to think about. Would my next step be to contact Libby about getting in touch with the new committee? Yes. Yes, Emma, to that question.
Great. I really appreciate the fact that all the people who are attending today are interested in this topic. I think sometimes money and our future passing are some of the most difficult topics for people to talk about. And sometimes we close our ears to these things, but they are really very, very important in terms of our families and those around us.
I believe my good friend Don Jenkins is on the call, and he has raised his icon hand. So perhaps we can unmute Don and he can verbally ask a question.
And my question, can you hear me?
There he is. Yep.
Yeah, okay. My question simply is, can you discuss the possibility of making gifts to our new campus in Lafayette that is soon to be built, hopefully?
Oh, that's a good
What kind of property would you suggest as a potential for that kind of a lifetime gift as well as a legacy gift?
So there is a campaign that's happening right now for CSC where we will be relocating from Walnut Creek to Lafayette, beautiful 6 acres property that we have been gifted to us. We are in the process of receiving entitlements for that. So I believe the question is if you wanted to leave your legacy or if you wanted to plan to leave a gift towards that, how does that then work?
Correct.
Yeah. Beth, do you want to answer that from
in terms of giving, there's lots of ways to do that. I went through some of those from the tax perspective, but I'm guessing that the cancer support community would be happy to accept a gift in any form that works for you. And the committee that Libby talked about would be happy to help guide you in making choices about that.
Good.
question, Don?
That's it. That's fine.
So Don, I will say too, just a couple real life examples is that we do have a current Legacy Society member who has been a member for years, but she got very excited after touring the Lafayette property, and she has decided to leave that inheritance to the property specifically. And then we have someone else who's left sort of a portion of what they want to leave to the campaign specifically. And there is another question. Would you recommend, Beth, getting affairs in order first or opening up communication with loved ones first?
Well, like the answer to so many things, I would say the answer depends. It depends on your family and how open they are to discussing those things. But I think what I would recommend as a first step is to make sure you know what you have, and then talking with an estate planning attorney, maybe along with a financial planner, and getting an idea of what you might want to do, and then share some of that information with your family and provide information to them in a way that will be clear in the expectations. I think if you talk with your loved ones first, they may not agree with the concepts and values that you have. And it really is your estate and your decision. So I think, get a semi-solid plan in place and then have the conversation.
It's a good question. Good answer. I don't see any more questions in the chat box. Feel free to before we close out, but otherwise, Beth, I want to thank you again for your time. It's really a true resource for us to have you, not only in your expertise, but also as a member and behind our mission. So thank you for being here tonight. Thanks to everyone who's joined us tonight. I hope you enjoy the rest of your night. And again, I'll be reaching out to all of you who are on this call to see if you would like a book that Beth recommended to get your legacy started.
Great. And just know it's part of my way of giving back to CSC for what it provided to me. Thank you.